In this video, we are going to compare 6 of the most popular colorimeters so that you know which one is the right for you. I'm Ingo from Roastery, and now let's go.
Roasting finished.
The color of the roasted coffee is the aspect in coffee roasting that has the highest influence on the taste of your beans. We all know if coffee are a bit lighter, you might have a bit more acidity, a bit darker roast, you might have a bit more full-bodied, or you might have a bit more bitterness. Also how you develop sweetness or some flavor aspects, that is all directly related to the color of your roasted coffee. So therefore, this is the one thing in quality control that all the roasteries are tracking. It's even more important if you are selling coffee, because in addition to the immediate effect, it's also the development of the beans, which is then influencing the way the beans are being extracted. So imagine, for example, in worst case, you have a gastronomy customer, they just have a machine, they're not experts in doing all the settings. Then they get a coffee which is really well dialed in, people get a nice coffee out of it, and then the next batch is a bit lighter or a bit darker, and suddenly they're doing over extraction or under extractions. The coffee is sour, the coffee is bitter, and the customers are really disappointed by the coffee. What will happen then is that they're going to change the supplier, and then you're out of their focus. So therefore, really be aware of the consistency in your roasting and take some quality control in order then to keep the customers that you have won. And then one thing you have to know when it comes to general understanding of these tools is that the way you are preparing the sample is really, really crucial in all of these tools. So an idea that many people have is that kind of these Agtron measurements that these tools are doing is a value that you can then easily compare with others. So let's say, for example, I have a coffee which is 67 Agtron, then I have another roastery which also has a coffee with 67 Agtron, so it's going to be the same. The point is actually, while all of these tools are really consistent in themselves, so you can then really do good measurement for your quality control, they are all a little bit different in the measurement. So you will get, even for the same sample, a little bit of different values no matter which tool you are using. So you have to be aware of that. You don't know which tool the other person is using. But what's even more is that the way you are preparing the sample is affecting the measurement really a lot. So if the coffee is a bit more coarse, if it's a bit more fine, you will have a really different measurement in the color. So therefore, it's important when you use any of those tools, no matter how expensive it is, even the tools for like 5-digit costs, in every case, you have to be really consistent in preparing the sample. So grind it always with the same grind size, put it in the tray the same way, distribute it the same way. This is really important for all of these tools. So you might now ask yourself, as a home roaster, do I also need to have a tool to measure the color of the roasted coffee? And here I could tell you, I mean, you could get one of these tools. Meanwhile, you find quite affordable options, but you can also just start with measuring the weight loss of your coffee. So when you measure how much coffee you put in the roaster, how much coffee you take out, and then you measure the weight loss, put that in relation to what you have put in, then you have a percentage. And this is correlating quite well with the development of your bean. So you get a tool for quality control already for free, or you can do then little bags with roasted coffee, or you have little color cards. So this is helping you to start. But then once you are starting to sell coffee, you really have to focus on the quality control and measure the color of your roasted coffee. And therefore, you find now a lot of options in the market. A couple of years ago, still those tools were extremely expensive. I mean, some people are paying then 5-digit amounts for these colorimeters, but now we find some that are starting at a couple of €100 until a couple of €1,000. I'm going to show you all those tools in the video so that they understand where the differences are coming from and what functions they have. But before we go into details, I'm just going to tell you what we have here on the table. So this one here is the MyTonino. This here is the CoffMeter A1. Here we have the Lighttells CM-100 Plus. Here we have the Lighttells CM-200. Here we have the DiFluid Omni. And here we have the DiFluid Omix Plus. To give you a general introduction, these 3 tools that we have here, They are tools that are just measuring the color of your coffee, so they are pure color meters. They do this job really well. They are affordable. So that's this segment of tools here. And then here we have 3 other tools which are also measuring the color of your roasted coffee, but they have then a lot of different functions in addition and quite some additional specifications that we are going to talk about then in detail. Some people are interested in the technology that is behind those tools, and here we have some different technologies that are coming into application. And what we have here in the Tonino is a polychromatic reflection, so it's kind of taking a picture of the sample that you have here and then kind of taking a picture of the color. It's making an average out of it, and then it's giving you a color indication here then in the so-called Tonino scale. This is something that is simple yet working really well. The only thing you have to know here is while for all the devices that we have here, it's always super important to be very consistent and precise in developing the sample. It's even more so with the Tonino, but we are going to talk about how we are going to prepare the samples for the different tools. And for all these tools that we have here, we are using near-infrared reflection, which is then having a broader spectrum. It's really reliable, working well, so it's a proven technology for measuring the color of your roasted coffee. And while in these 2 tools, we are just working with this near-infrared reflection and IR technology. So here on these 2 tools, I get an average of the color of the roasted coffee, which is actually then what I want usually. So usually I just take one number, the average, and this is what these tools are going to measure. So here in these tools, we also have this near-infrared technology, but in addition to that, we also have an optical sensor. So here it's a CCD sensor that we also have, and here it's a CMOS sensor. And what these tools are doing in addition is that they're not only giving an average, but they're then also measuring how much color I have in each color segment. So they're splitting it up, they're giving you a graph where I see the distribution of the color, and I then see also how the variation is, so that I see how even my roast is or how uneven it is. This is something that these tools get in addition. And then also, especially this tool with the CMOS sensors, they have then also additional functions like calculating out the chuffs if you want. So you can set here if you want to do that or not. And then they're taking then the light colored chuffs out of the calculation and are only measuring the coffee that you have in the sample. So this is an option that you have here in addition, while on these tools you just get then the average color of your roasted coffee. So then a discussion that I often hear is, what should you measure? Should you measure the ground coffee or the whole beans? What are the advantages and the disadvantages of each measurement? Some people would like to measure the color of the whole beans because then they don't have any loss of beans for the measurement. But actually what you always have to do, and the standard in the industry to do, is the color of the ground coffee, because this is showing you the development of the bean, of the inside of the whole bean. So what you always have to do is the ground coffee. Some people then are doing the whole beans in addition to that, so that they see then the delta, the difference between how the development is on the outside or the inside. I usually don't do that, but you can do that as well. So as I said, this is always in addition. Ground is always first, but you have to know, if you do then the measurement of the whole beans, this is something that all of these tools can do. So the Tonino can only measure the ground coffee, these can measure ground coffee and whole beans, but you have to know, when you're measuring the whole beans, that you have to do several measurements, not only one. Because just imagine here, you see the little cup where you put in the whole beans. If you have, for example, a sample where there is one Quaker bean, so one very light bean, if this Quaker is on the surface, it's going to take quite some space here, and it's going to change the measurement to a much lighter color. But if the Quaker would be down there below the beans and you have then fully roasted beans above, you wouldn't see the Quaker and you would get a much different measurement. Therefore, you have to do several measurements when you do the whole beans. When you do ground coffee, it's of course a bit different because there you have broken everything down into small particles. They're going to be mixed up and you have a much more averaged measurement. But now let's have a look at the different tools. I'm going to do now first an introduction where I'm talking about all the features of the tools, and then later in this video we are going to measure with each of these tools so that you can really see then how they are working. So we start here with the MyTonino tool. MyTonino is a really simple but effective, well-working tool. It's being developed by the same team that has developed the Artisan software. So they're really making these tools or coffee technology accessible to a broad range of people. Artisan is a free software that they launched at the point where most people were still documenting on paper. And then also the Tonino was something they launched while usually you had to pay thousands of euros for a colorimeter. But this one is really affordable. It's working simply with this like photo technology. So you're really kind of taking a picture of the surface of the beans. What's here is that you're only measuring the ground coffee, so you cannot measure the whole bean. It's giving you an indication in their Tonino scale, so they have a bit of known scale. They give you a color name, but what you can do if you want to have Agtron scale is that you then can connect the tool to a computer and is going then to calculate it in Agtron if you like that. I told you before that you have to be really consistent in preparing the sample, and this is even more crucial than for the Tonino tool, which is really sensitive on that. They recommend to ground the coffee even a bit finer than espresso. What I actually usually do when I prepare samples for the Tonino, and this is something where I have really good experiences with, I prepare the coffee always exactly the same as I'm going to prepare a doppio on my espresso machine, because there I always have the same workflow. I take the same grind size, I take the same amount of coffee, I'm going to temp it the same. So this is something that I could recommend, because here you have then really consistency in your workflow. Can do it then also otherwise if you want to have a specific workflow for the Tonino, but this is really working well, and the size of the coffee sieve is actually then perfect to put the Tonino on it. So that's the way I'm doing the measurements on this tool here. Then next to the Tonino, I have the CoffMeter, which is one of the newest tools that we have here. It's coming from the same company, DiFluid, that is developing these high technology tools. They came then to a decision that they also want to make a more affordable range, which they can then provide to people that don't want to spend all the money for a high-tech tool. The CoffMeter is working really well. It's just much simpler in its use and in its function. And what it's doing is it's measuring the color of the ground coffee, the color of the whole bean. It's just measuring an average of the color. You have then the values that you are measuring inside of the tool. So you can go through a list, you can go through the history. If you want to have it on your documentation or so, you have then to write it down by hand. So far, because what DiFluid is doing, they have actually two really nice apps. They have an own app, DiFluid app. They have the Coffee OS app. At the moment now, it's April 2026. The CoffMeter is not connected to this app, but actually DiFluid is one of the most innovative companies in the coffee market. So I can really assume that the chances are high that when you're watching this video a bit later this year or in a couple of months, then it might already be possible to have this connected to the app because it has Bluetooth built in. So just check if this option is now here. At the moment, it's just a tool that you put here, you measure your coffee, you get your values, and that's it. In the function, really comparable to that is the CM-100 Plus from Lighttells. It's also measuring then the ground coffee. You can measure the whole beans. It's giving you an average of the color. What you will have here is also then a history of the measurements in the tool, but you can then also connect it to your computer and then take down a Excel file where you have the measurements in an Excel or in a CSV file so that you can directly take it to your computer if you like this. Here then on the Lighttells 200 and all these tools here, I have actually a bit more functions. I'm not only measuring the average of the roasted coffee, I'm also getting a distribution of the color values. This is thanks to the sensors they have built in. So here it's a CCV sensor, and it's then optically measuring the distribution. So you know if there is a deviation, so you know how even the roast has been that you have been done, and you see then in all of the color spectrums how many percentage of the color grades are there, which is a really nice graph that you see then on the display of the tool. You're going to see it when we are doing then a measurement with this tool. These Lighttells tools are actually really proven. They are really heavy duty. They are on the market since a lot of years, used for competitions and in a lot of roasteries. So this is a tool that is for sure then really reliable in your roastery. What's particular on the Lighttells is that here you see the sample is quite large when you compare it, for example, with the DiFluid one, which is much smaller in its size. This has some advantages and some disadvantages. So the advantage is then, of course, the more of samples you're using, the more particles you have, the higher then the averaging is, so the better the result actually that you're getting. But then on the other hand, it's also more coffee that you're using just for the measurement. So you're kind of losing more coffee that you're using than here for the measurement of your coffee. This is just something to be aware of. It has advantages and disadvantages. Then also what's in addition on the Lighttells to the color measurement is that you have also the option to measure the particle size. So you can then also measure how large are the particles that you are using. And this is especially if you want to set your grinder in a perfect grind size, or if you want to check how your grinder is working. This is an additional option that you have on this Lighttells CM-200. And same as the CM-100 Plus, you have the option to connect it to your computer and then download the values as an Excel file. Here we are coming to the DiFluid Omni, which is from the functions quite comparable to the Lighttells CM-200. It is newer, so it has a touch screen, has a nicer screen with swiping functions. It's having a CMOS sensor built in besides of the NIR technology. So also here you don't only have the averaging, but you also then have a distribution that you can see in your screen. You also have the possibility to do particle size analysis, same as the Lighttells CM-200. And when it comes to the color measurement, one thing that you have in addition is that you can then set a calculating factor for the chefs. So imagine you have a sample with the ground coffee in it, and then you have also some of these light chefs. You can define here if you want to have them just taken in the calculation so that you get really an average, or if you want the system to calculate it out, because with the sensor it can then detect the chefs, calculate them out, and then you have just the color of the ground coffee without the chefs measured. As I said before, when we talked about the CoffMeter, DiFluid has some nice apps. So they have a DiFluid app. And here you have some nice functions, like, for example, you can do a measurement of the whole beans, you can do a measurement of the ground coffee, you can even then do some measurements and do an averaging, but it's then also directly comparing the color of the ground and the whole beans and giving you a delta. So if you want to track that, you can easily do that in the app and then see directly the delta between the whole beans and the ground coffee for all the measurements that you are doing. Also, in this app, one thing that I just discovered, which is new, because before the values were just in the app or on the tools, but now you can then also extract the data and make a CSV file and send it directly then from your app as an email or WhatsApp to a friend or to your computer, so that you can then now also download the values directly to your computer for your quality control. Now we're coming to the DiFluid Omix Plus, which is then quite different from the other tools because it's kind of a full measurement tool with all the functions that you need as a coffee roastery. So it's not only measuring the color of your roasted coffee, it's then also doing all the green coffee quality control that you need in a roastery. So it can measure the moisture content of your green coffee, can measure the density. It even has then an optical sensor where it's not only measuring the bulk density, but also kind of the real density. I made a video recently when I talk about density where I explained it in detail. It also measuring the water activity of your beans, the screen size of your coffee. It can do that then not only for green coffee, but also for parchment or for whole cherries. If you're a coffee producer, this might be relevant for you. But in a roastery, it's usually that we're working with green coffee. We do the density, moisture, and water activity measurement. It doesn't have the particle size measurement, so this is one function that it doesn't have. It's also a function that I usually hardly ever see people working with in roasteries, but what it has is this green coffee analyzing and then also the color of the roasted coffee. And when it comes to the color of the roasted coffee, they have actually the same technology and the same functions. So it's measuring the average, it's measuring then also the distribution, the evenness of the roast, it's measuring whole beans, it's measuring ground coffee, and it can then also give you the delta in the app, also have the app connection where you can then download the CSV files. So much for that. I hope this gave you a good overview. And now we are going to do a measurement with each of these colorimeters. The first tool we are going to have a look at is the Tonino colorimeter. And what I do here is what I always do with the colorimeter at the beginning is calibrating it. This is working quite simply with the Tonino. So I lift it up, put it on the red part until it shows a red square here. Take it up, put it on the green until it says calibrated. And now the device is ready to use. And as I told you before, I prefer to do here my classic doppio espresso workflow. So I take my coffee, I have 18 grams of coffee. Distribute it here, take my distribution tool. I'm going to temp it. And then I'm ready for the measurement. So I'm taking the Tonino, putting it down here. Gives me a value of 103. Lift it up again to a second measurement. It says 103 again. I usually do some measurements just to make sure that I put everything perfectly and there is no space or something between. Now I'm going to do the same again just to see how consistent it is, especially when it comes to my workflow. So here we are again. I put my coffee in. Distribute it. Temp it. Now I'm going to measure again, put the Tonino on it, and it gives me again exactly this 103 to the second measurement. So you see how the Tonino is working. It's really fast, super simple to use, and you get a good reading if you have a perfect workflow. The device we have here is the CoffMeter A1. And when I switch this off, I can see here there's a nice touchscreen to operate it. And here I can see there's some settings that I can do. I can establish a Bluetooth connection. At the moment, this is more than to do firmware updates. But as I told you, I am quite confident that in the future somewhere, CoffMeter or DiFluid might then connect it also to the Coffee OS app, but it hasn't happened yet, and I don't want to promise anything. Here I have reference standards. This is actually quite irrelevant, so it's just the naming of the samples. So you will see when you're doing samples, it doesn't have only an Agtron value. It also says something like medium or full city if I would change to common, but this is actually quite irrelevant because you're going to use the Agtron. Then language, we can choose English, Chinese, several Asian languages. Screen brightness, make it lighter or darker, auto power off, so at how many minutes the device is then switching off. And this is actually what you can do on settings. Here you have a history where you see the previous measurements. You can see if it was a bean, so whole bean, or ground coffee, and then you can just see the value. So 80.1, a light measurement, but you don't have any more information, that's what you get. But here you are going to do, like with any other colorimeter, is first you're going to do a calibration. And then you can see here there is this little plate where it says 22.8 Agtron. This is the value of this color here. So you put the device on it, press on calibration. Here you see 22.8. Then you press calibration. The device is calibrating, and now you're ready to go. And when you want to do a measurement, you have two sides here. This side, which is a bit flatter, is the one for the ground coffee. The one which is deeper is the one for the whole beans. So if you're doing now measurements with ground coffee, we are going to take enough coffee to fill this part here. Then we can distribute the coffee with a ruler or any flex tool. Oops, that was not good. So be careful that it's really even. I have to fill this spot here so that it's even until the top. Now I put the A1 on it. Look that it's perfectly on the ring. Then I can go to test, and here I have a choice between bean or ground. I take ground coffee in that case, press on test, and then it's going to measure it. It says 79.7 Agtron. Here, this is what I told you, light, so there is also a naming of a value that it's adding. Turn it a little bit for another test. 80, so it's quite consistent then on the reading of this sample. What I'm going to do now is take another sample just to show you if it's going to be consistent when setting up the samples more than once. Preparing it again, putting the ground coffee on it. So putting the A1 here, 79.8. $80.1. So you see the measurements were all in a range of around 0.2 to 0.3 value points in variance. This is really close. So an issue would be if the measurement would be like 81 and 89 or something like that. But within the range of 79 to 80.1, we are then very close in the readings. What we are going to do now is a reading where I'm testing the whole beans. So now I have turned the cup. I put in the beans, and you can see here on this sample, of course, then having that number of beans in this little cup is not as evenly distributed as a ground coffee. And also you can see here that there are some chuffs, some silver skins still on the beans. You have some chuffs here. So that is why I told you you should do, when you do whole bean readings, several readings, because here you will have a bigger variance when doing more than one reading. So change from ground to bean, do a test. It's landing at 64.9. Another one here, 65.2. And now when I'm going to set up the sample again, I don't have those light beans anymore with the chuffs on it. You see, they're all quite dark, not so many chuffs here. So I expect now to get a darker reading. You see 62.8 points is a bit of a darker Agtron scale. But still they're quite close. But yeah, this is the way you can measure whole beans. As I told you, when measuring whole beans, I would do more than one sample. If you're measuring ground coffee, then the measurements are so consistent that one of the samples is actually enough then in practical use. And this is the A1 by CoffMeter. Here I have the next tool, which is the CM-100 Plus from Lighttells. I switch it on. It takes about a minute to warm up before I do the first reading on a day. So the device is now switched on, and here I also have a menu which is a bit similar to the one from the A1. So I see measure. This is one thing we're going to have a look at later. Then I can see here history. So I see the previous measurements. I see the Agtron values. Then a name. Is it light or medium dark? I see here it was ground coffee. This was whole beans. So I can see here the history of my previous readings. I can do a calibration. This is something we are going to have a look at right now. But before we go into the setup, here I can set the menu, name style, so common or SCA. This is really then just the little expression like light, which is standing next to the number. It's, in my opinion, quite irrelevant. Auto power off after how much time the device is switching off, then reset to factory settings. Then when I go back here, what I'm going to do is a calibration, like with all the other tools as well. I have here a little gray plate. And one thing just to tell you, these calibration plates, put them back in a dark space, put them back in the case, store them in a dark and cool environment so that they don't change in their color. So don't leave them open somewhere, really put them back. Put the device on it, go on calibration. Is the gray card ready? Yes. We do a calibration, takes just a couple of seconds. Now the device is ready and I can start my measurement after having stored the calibration card again. So you can see here also, same as with the A1, I have a bit more a flatter and a deeper part of this little cup. I take the flatter one for the ground coffee. So I'm taking now a spoon of ground coffee, put them here, distribute it with a ruler. Evenly distributed. Quite a nice sample. I put the CM-100 on it. Then I go to measure. And here I have to set, do I have whole beans or ground? I go on ground. It's measuring 80.6 Agtron, so quite similar to what the A1 was measuring. And then here I see this expression light. I go back, can do another one. Up. Ground coffee, 80.6. So you see, usually for ground coffee, the measurements are the same. When I change the device, it's just I want to make sure that I put it really on the cup and not at any open space. This is why I do more than one readings. And now just to check, I prepare another sample to see if the device is consistent in its readings. Sample ready. Lighttells on it. Enter. He's measuring again 80.6, exactly the same value. Again 80.5, so really consistent reading when you are using the ground coffee. And now we are doing readings with the whole beans. So we spill them over the cup again. Yep, a bit more. Distribute them. So good. Just see I have a little bit of chuffs here. I have, well, a light bean here. Now, when I'm doing the next measurement, I have to go one step back so that I can choose whole bean. And then I see 59.1 Agtron value on the whole beans. When I'm changing the placement in the whole beans, I might have slightly variances because they are not as even distributed as the ground coffee. So, do another sample here. And I'm measuring 64.9 here. 64.6. So all in all, a little bit of a higher color because here I have some light beans. So you see having some light beans or some color differences in the whole bean is affecting then the reading quite a little bit. This is how I'm going to read the whole beans and the ground coffee on the CM-100 Plus. Next device is the CM-200 from Lighttells, and you can see when I'm switching it off, when I'm switching it on, it has a colored display, a little bit a larger display than the CM-100. I can do scale, which is then the color reading. I can do particle, which is the particle size analysis. I have a logger where I can see particle analysis or scale. And here I can see then the previous readings that I had. And I have some settings that I can set. So like the date, the time that we have, naming. Again, you've seen this before. This is just a little name that is next then to the number, whether this is in common or SCAA. Sieve style, this is then related to the particle measurement. And bean selection, here I can define if the device is going to choose itself. If I have always ground or always whole beans, I'm putting it on auto so the device has to find it out. Calibration, we are going to do a calibration right now. Power saving is then again when the device is going to be switched off and reset to factory. So yeah, do the calibration. Again, here the little calibration plate is packed in this little bag so that it's protected from the sun and it's not going to change its color. Then I go to calibration. I have to confirm twice. Now it's calibrating. And then I have a calibrated colorimeter in front of me with which I can now measure ground coffee and whole beans. You see here this plate is a bit larger for the CM-200. I have again the flatter part for the ground coffee, the deeper part for the whole beans. And I'm going to prepare my sample. So you see I need quite a bit of ground coffee for the CM-200. On the other hand, it's really easy to prepare a nice sample on the Lighttells. So this is a little bit the trade-off between using more ground coffee, which you then take off your roast, versus having a good prepared sample. As you know, preparation of the sample is crucial. So putting the device on it. Now I can just press particle, which is particle size analysis, or scale. So I'm doing the scale. And you see I again have here a color of 80.2. It discovered that I have ground coffee. And here are some values, but this is nicer displayed if I just press on this button. And then I see the distribution of the color values. So most of 49% is here in this range of 80.2 plus minus 5. And then here 21 in the range, which is a little bit lighter, 10 are a bit darker, then 22 in the range which is a bit lighter, so I can see the distribution, and it's actually quite even here in this sample. I do another measurement. So here, which gives me another 80 Agtron. Again, we are going to do a second sample in order to see how consistent the device is reading, or the measurement on this device is. So put enough coffee on it. To have the second sample, pressing scale again, 79.8, so pretty close. 79.9, so before we had 80.1, which is really a close reading. The differences might come from a little bit of differences in the silver skin and the chuffs that I have here, but it's really consistent, and I do those readings on it. Also, actually, with the devices we had before, we were always around this 80 Agtron. And now I'm doing the same for the whole beans. So you see, when preparing the sample, I have a little bit of chuffs here, a bit of lighter bean here. Let's see what it gives us. And the press scale again, it found out that it was whole beans, 59.9. Distribution, there is a little bit of a higher variance, which is just natural for whole beans. Another measurement, 59.9. And when I'm going to do the sample again, I can expect maybe a slightly lighter reading, because you can see here there is a bit of a quaker here and there. So 63.7, 63.7. So this is how I'm measuring the whole beans and the ground coffee on the CM-200. Next device we are going to have a look at is the DiFluid Omni. If I switch it on, I can see here it has a nice touch display. I can see roast, which is the color of the roasted beans. Particle is the particle size analysis. Calibration is the calibration of the beans. And then I have some settings here. I can do settings for roasting. So again, the naming, SCA, or then the common names, Agtron range. So here I actually then can display different ranges. I can go on a full spectrum, so then I have all the steps displayed, or I can go to a little bit of a narrower like view, like for example, if I'm more into the specialty, then I can close the scale down to specialty or competition coffees, and then I have finer gradings within here. Then more the light roasts, I go on full spectrum to have the possibility to show lighter and darker roasts. Silver screen detection, this is something I'm now switching off, and I'm going to show you then the reading with it switched on. So this is going to detect the silver skins and then taking them out of the reading. Then here I have settings for the particle size analysis. General is then like display brightness, when it's going off, language, English, Chinese. I have then device info and factory reset, like with the other tools as well. And if I swipe on the right side, I can see here the previous measurements, and also then the history on the color readings. So you see, I see here all my old readings. Can go back, can do the same then for, okay, let me check. So I can go back, but then I can do the same for the particle measurements where I see the previous particle measurements. And now we are going to do, as with all the other devices, a calibration. So I'm putting the tool on the little calibration plate, press on calibration, start. It's calibrating. Close this again and put it back in the little bag. And now I have here for the measurement also two sides, like the flatter one for the coffee grounds, the deeper one for the whole beans. And now I'm going to prepare my sample of coffee grounds. Take the device here. I go on roast. It's analyzing now my ground coffee. It says 86.6 Agtron and very light. And here you can see the distribution of the color in another display. It's pretty nice to see then the colors of the coffee, how much they are a bit lighter, how much they're a bit darker, how much there is now then in this range of the averaging. Now I'm going to do a measurement where I'm going to add silver skin detection with exactly the same sample. And it's actually giving me the same value because there are hardly any silver skins here. It's something that you will then more see when we do then the whole beans. 86.5. I do another sample. To another measurement where I can see I'm getting again the 86.8 Agtron. So the basic Agtron value that it gave me is slightly different from the ones that I measured with Lighttells. So the question is now, which one is the correct one? That is really hard to say, but this is just the information that I gave you before. Within themselves, the readings are quite consistent, but there are then some slight differences which might come from the way the sample is prepared or then also the way it's measuring. So therefore, it's really hard to do then precise comparison with other people that are measuring their coffees, even more so if I often experience and also roasteries that are not doing proper calibrations. The whole beans are 68.6. And now if we do this sample also again, we are getting values of 69, so quite similar. 69.1. The only thing I want to show you now is what is happening if on the ground beans I'm going to turn the silver skin detection off. So now it's not calculating out the silver skins, just measuring the whole sample. Then you see I get a bit of a different reading, 73.1, because it's now a little bit lighter, as these chuffs, or that you can see here, or the silver skins, are not being calculated out of the sample. This is how you can measure whole beans or ground coffee on the DiFluid Omni tool. As you could see, all the devices are giving more or less the same results. The only difference is here in the DiFluid Omni, while the DiFluid Omni was then measuring in itself quite consistently and precisely. So my assumption is that here somehow with this calibration plate of the DiFluid Omni, there has been a little color change, and this is then directly changing the values that your device is measuring. Therefore, as said at the beginning, be careful when you want to compare values with other people, with other roasteries. Even if they are calibrated, it might be that somehow the calibration has changed a little bit and the device is giving you different results. Therefore, make sure that you're always using the same device when you're doing your quality control, because your device is then giving you the same results from roast to roast. And last but not least, we are going to have a look at the Omix Plus from DiFluid. So when I switch this device on, I can see on the touchscreen that here I have different measurements that I can do. Moisture and density, this is then for green coffee beans. Water activity is also for green coffee beans, and the roast color for the roasted coffee. Calibration, this is something we're going to do then. I have a history also, and here I have the settings. Measurement, I can do sample type auto detect, dry cherry, parchment, green beans, roasted ground. So you see then dry cherry, parchment, green beans is for the density, water content, water activity management or measurement, and then roasted beans, roasted ground is for the color. I just leave it to auto detect. Environment, is it allowed to do then environmental measurements? Water activity, is it automatically measured? So this is all not relevant for what we are doing here. What is relevant for us is then here again in roast the settings of this standards, silver skin detection. I start again then with this off and going to do then a measurement with the silver skin detection on. And this is what I can do as settings in roasting. Temperature unit, I can then set it to Celsius or Fahrenheit. I have again some channel, Bluetooth connection, auto power off, language, screen brightness, as you know it also from the other DiFluid tools. Device info, factory reset. But now we are going to prepare it, and what we are going to do is a calibration. So what you do here is that you put this container here with this Agtron 25 in the tool. I put the device on it, go to calibration, Agtron calibration, and then it's testing 25 Agtron, calibration completed. I can go out, and now I can prepare my samples. And here with the Omix, I have then like these two little containers. One is for the ground coffee, one is for the whole beans. You know it already. I start with the preparation of the sample for the ground coffee, which I have here, distributed with this ruler here. Sample prepared. Then I put this here in the device, put the Omix Plus on it. Then I go to testing. It found out that we have roast color. You can see it has again this 80.8. And also when I go here, I can see again then the distribution, how even it is, standard deviation, the averaging, and then the different ranges of the color, how this is distributed. So this is how the measurement is going for the roasted color. And now we're doing the same with the settings of the silver skin detection on. When I'm measuring now, I'm getting to 76.6. So the measurement changes a little bit because I have here some silver skin that he detected in his reading. Now I do the same again with a fresh sample. So putting this back in the machine. Measuring it again. I have again 75.7 with the silver skin detection on, and if I'm doing the silver skin detection off, I'm being back at 79.6 Agtron, and then I can see also how much is the ratio of extremely light beans, 36.8, medium light, darker beans. So I can see then here the distribution of the different values, averaging again, standard deviation. Now we are going to do the same for the ground coffee. So I prepared the sample now with the ground coffee. Put this in the device on again, measuring, and it gives me 57.4 Agtron. If I do a measurement again, 57.4. If I'm turning it, $56.7, the slightly difference. And then I'm going to be switching on silver skin detection again. And here it gives me 54.1. So a bit of a different value because it found some chuffs here, some silver skin that it has calculated out. Preparing this sample again. Putting them in the device. And then I have a measurement of 54.9. So you see again the distribution, and this is the way you can then measure whole beans or ground coffee on the Omix Plus. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you want to know more about these different tools, or if you want to order one, then come over to our website, roastery.com. We have free shipping in all Europe. We have the machines usually in stock. We ship them fast with DHL. We have a service center in Germany, one in Switzerland. We give you direct support. We give you consulting and help if you want to know more about each single tool. Also, you might find on our website when you head over that we have also small coffee roasting machines. We have green coffee that we are offering, courses, workshops, and if you want, you can always approach me with specific questions. I'm happy to help you. You find everything on our website, roastables.com.